part two, now that you have gone out and you have practiced these skills, is first reflect a little bit. Think about how did that experience, how did communicating in that way affect things for you? How did it affect your relationships? One of the problems in society today is that people don't think deeply enough. You hear so much about overthinking, but overthinking isn't actually a thing. I am staunch on this. I have never met a single person, and I've met people that, like, you know, for what people typically think of as overthinking, I've met people that overthink like crazy, and I still don't think they're overthinking. Overthinking is actually just thinking about things incorrectly. It's the methodology with which you are using to think. So if you are thinking about something and you're trying to get to like this end point by thinking about it, usually what I see is that people are thinking like this, right? So like a really good example is like that argument that I was talking about earlier. The direction that you want to get in is you want to get back to like peace in your relationship during that argument, right? But the way that a lot of people try to go about that is by saying like, you're so stupid, you don't understand, whoop, wrong direction, right? So that's a great example of like just thinking in the wrong direction. So the reason that I went off on this whole tangent is because it's really important for you to stop and take some time to think about how that communication actually affected things for you. Did it affect things positively? Did it affect things negatively? Did it not affect things at all? So what I'd recommend is take out a little document of some kind, whether it's like a piece of paper or you like literally open a document on your computer, whatever it is, and actually literally write down, type out, write out, whatever, the things that were affected by communicating this way with other people. Okay? Pause the video to do that. Okay, great. Now that you've done that, now you're like, oh, I should like apply this to myself, right? No, not yet. First, we have to understand some basic ideas. So the first idea that I want to go over in this like part two is, why is it that we fight with ourselves in the first place? Like, it's all us. Shouldn't we like agree with ourselves? Like, if I'm going to agree with anyone, shouldn't it be me? It doesn't make sense that I don't agree with myself sometimes. What the heck? So the reason that that is because when we go through hard stuff in our lives, I would use the word trauma, but a lot of people are like, oh, like I didn't go through trauma. I wasn't traumatized. There, you know, like people have been through like way worse than me. So I just say when you go through hard stuff in your life, so that you don't, you know, like block off the trauma trigger word because it's all stigmatized and stuff. Okay, anyway, so when you go through tough stuff in your life, what happens is that a piece of you, so we have like our identity, we have who we are, right? And it starts out as like a whole piece, right? Like when you're a little baby, you don't fight with yourself on anything. You just like run around and do things and giggle and play and it's fun, right? But then as you get older, these like pieces of you start to get like ripped off almost. And when they get ripped off, they get frozen in time and they continue to act on you as you go throughout your life. So to use an example, let's say that you grew up with parents that never told you that you did good enough. Let's say that, you know, you got like 99 out of 100 questions right. And they asked, well, why'd you get this question wrong? And like, then if, you know, you got 100 out of 100 questions right, they were like, you know, that was just sort of like what was expected of you. They didn't say like, good job, or we're proud of you. They were just like, yeah, that's what you're supposed to do. Then a piece of you gets like broken off in that process. And that piece of you gets frozen in time. And the sort of like lesson that it learns is, oh, nothing that I do is ever good enough. I have to be perfect because that's what's expected of me, and nothing else is ever good enough. So then what happens is that as we get older, as we grow up, then we'll go into situations that will sort of activate that part of you. So that part of you, like, imagine that it's like, you know, frozen like a statue. And then all of a sudden something happens and it like comes to life and it like runs up and like kicks you out of the like control seat. You're like in your like mind in your like spaceship control center place, like Star Trek or whatever. And you're sitting there and it kicks you out of your seat and it sits down in the like captain's seat and says, hey, I'm taking over. This idiot doesn't know what he's doing. Y'all need to listen to me because I've been through something like this. And then all of a sudden you're in that argument with yourself, right? You're like, you're getting back up and trying to like kick him out of his seat. You're like, no. We want to do this thing. We really want to focus on this thing. He's like, no, don't listen to him. He doesn't know what he's talking about. And it's this whole like, you know, vicious argument that happens. So the first thing that we want to do is we actually want to start to identify those parts, because most of us have, like, imagine like a little council table, and there's just a bunch of different yous all sitting around that council table, right? They're like all different ages, and they've all been through different stuff. They all have different things that are important to them. And ideally, you want to be like at the head of that table, and they just sort of like give you, they're like advisors. They give you advice. And then you're like, yes, I will take that into consideration. And then, you sort of like move on and do what you want to do, right? But most of the time, that's not how it works for people. Most of the time, what happens is that one of those guys runs up, kicks you out of your seat, and you get into that argument, right? So first, we need to identify who the heck your council is. Who are all these guys, right? Because most of the time, we have a pretty antagonistic relationship with our council members. We are constantly fighting our council members. And so no wonder it's so hard to do stuff. It's so hard to be productive and accomplish more in your life. So we need to get an idea of who these guys are. Okay, so what I want you to do, go back to that document that you just like wrote down some stuff in about, how communication affected things for you. And I just want you to start to think about, like, okay, like, who are my guys? Like, so I used the example earlier of like the not good enough guy. There's a not good enough guy on my council. And whenever some situation comes up where I could be perceived as not good enough, he activates and like runs up to the head of the table, kicks me out of my seat, and starts that whole argument. So write out all of the different guys that you can identify. And the good news, well, I don't know, you might not view it as good news. I view it as good news because I think it's kind of fun exploring this stuff because I'm a nerd. But the good news is that you don't have to know who all of them are all at once. Even you will inevitably discover more as you continue to navigate in this journey. But for now, just start to identify the ones that you can. And then once you've identified them, I want you to start to look at where they came from originally. What was their inception? How did they form, right? What ripped them off from the like whole identity that existed originally? So write all that out. Take all the time that you need. The other thing is that I offer coaching services. So if you're like going through this process and you are like stuck, you really want help, I can help guide you through this process and help, like discover these different parts of yourself, all that sort of thing. So if you'd like to work together, go over to my website, starcoaching.com. I'll link in the description, and join the waiting list.